Number 1.
I was 11 years old. I spent the night hanging out with my closest friend at the time. I left around 7 o'clock. She was about a 15 to 20 minute walk away from my house. It was the month of December, so it was icy and dark outside. While I was walking down the long sidewalk, I had to make a turn halfway. Across the turn down the sidewalk, I noticed a man way further down. He was alone at the moment. 10 seconds later, a 4-door car drove up to him. It was a long street till my turn, so I watched him talk to whoever it was in the car. It sped off, and he just stopped, watching me walk. As I kept walking, all I heard was, "Hey you, come here. Stop. Hey you." I freaked out. I started walking faster, and then I noticed he started running towards me. I started running for my life. Since the ground was covered in snow and ice, all I literally thought as I was running was, "Please God, don't let me slip. Mom, please help me." I was crying as I was running. He caught up extremely fast. I kept looking back and noticed the car slowly driving behind him. As I ran, I felt his arm reach out and try to grab the hood of my sweatshirt. By God's grace, his hand slipped, and I ran a block, trying to find a house with its lights on. I finally found one and banged at the door, almost ready to break it down to get in. This older couple finally answered. I ran inside explaining what happened. The husband then went outside to try to find him. When he went out, he saw the man standing at the end of the street, staring at him. Then he ran off. My mom called the cops and pulled me out of school for 4 days afterwards. He was never found. For a while after, I would buy flowers and a card and leave it at the couple's step, thanking them for saving my life. God only knows what would have happened if he got me and dragged me into that car. Let's never meet again.
Number 2.
It was about 2 years ago when I encountered the scariest thing in my life. Now, we live in a safe town if you compare it to the surrounding cities. But in reality, my town is sort of shady. I was 15 at the time, and my younger sister was only 11. One day, at around 5 or 6-ish, my mother gave me some money to go down to the gas station and get some milk. The gas station is only 3 blocks from our house, and being a sophomore in high school and part of the football team, I was quite confident I could handle my own while just going to the gas station. I was wrong. My sister had her heart set on walking down there with me, and even though a girl who lived just a few roads down from us had just gotten raped a few weeks before, my mom let her come with me anyway, though I was still paranoid something would happen to her, because even though she was 11 and quite tough for her age, she was still my baby sister, and I didn't want anything to happen to her. I was, and still am, especially after what happened, very overprotective of my sister. So, I made her promise she wouldn't walk too far ahead of me and would stay glued to my side the whole time we were out. Anyway, about halfway there, we were taking these dirt back roads, so there was no sidewalk, and we were walking on the side of the road. I should also note, the road we were walking on had no houses, just woods, and we hadn't seen anyone drive by the entire time. I heard what sounded like a car at the time, driving toward us, and grabbed my sister's arm to pull her into the grass, just to be sure that he did not hit us, because the road was fairly small in width. That's when I felt a sharp pain hit me fast, on the back of the head, and I collapsed to the ground. What the fuck, was all I could think. And my vision was still blurry, from the tears and probably from the pain. But when I heard my sister screaming, I looked up and finally realized what was going on. It was a guy on a motorcycle, holding a fairly large stick, like one he must have grabbed from the woods, and I immediately knew he hit me over the head with it. I'm ashamed to say, I was frozen with fear as I watched him pull out something, I think it was a wire, and tie my sister's wrist with it. She was crying and thrashing around, but I could hear him muttering stuff about killing me if she didn't cooperate with him. That's when I finally jolted into action, because holy shit, this guy's trying to take my sister away from me. I remember ripping the stick from his hand, and I think the only reason I was able to do so is because of the adrenaline. And because he was primarily focused on tying my sister up rather than holding the stick, he yelled, "Fuck!" And that's the last thing he said, because I started beating his ugly face in with it until it snapped in half. While he was trying to collect himself, lying on the ground and groaning in pain, I thought, grab her and run. But I didn't, because I always hated how in horror movies, they'd strike the killer down and then run, instead of finishing him off, so you know he can't get to you or anyone else. And that's what popped into my mind. So I kicked him really hard twice in the groin, and that made him pass out completely. That's when I got out the pocket knife from my back pocket, one I only had just remembered I had. I cut the wire from my sister and threw her over my shoulder and just took off running. I really think that if it wasn't for the intense adrenaline and the fact that I'm super proactive for my poor little sister, I probably would have gotten killed, and she would probably have gotten kidnapped, and God knows what else. Luckily we got home safely, and my mom called the cops. The man had run away before they could find him, and was never caught. Number 3. This happened back in 2010, when I was 15. I lived with my mother, sister, and little brother in a rather dodgy part of Western Australia. While my mother did a great job of keeping us away from the more dangerous parts of our suburb 98% of the time, my brother, who was 13 at the time, and I, being the reckless kids that we were, would always try to bend the rules whenever we could. So one day, my mom tells us that she's going out to the shops to get ingredients for tonight's dinner, so I would have to watch over the house. 45 minutes passed with no issue at all. After a while, my little brother comes in and asks me if I'd like to go kick the football around in the park, just around the corner from our house. While I can't remember the exact time, it was definitely later than 5:30, so it was starting to get quite dark. I tell my brother that mom would be pissed if we went, but he insists, and eventually I give in and tell him to wait for me as I get changed into my sneakers and shorts. After I'm done, I walk to the lounge room and realize my brother is nowhere to be seen. I check the front door, and lo and behold, it's open. I call out to my sister, who was 18 at the time, and ask if she knew where he had gone. She replies that he had said to tell me that he was going to the park. By this point, the sun had already set, and outside was quite dark. I was also extremely angry. I tell her to watch the house, and I run off into the direction of the park. I get there about 5 minutes later, and to my surprise, the park is completely empty. I call out my brother's name and tell him to cut the shit. No answer. I call it out again, but this time I tell him our mom is home and that she's extremely angry and wants us both home immediately. Still, no answer. This is where I start to get worried. Normally my brother always falls for that trick, even when we're home, and does whatever I tell him to do. Suddenly, I hear a faint muffled noise coming from the left of me. I look and see a tall figure quickly move behind a large fence that covers an alleyway that runs parallel to the park on the left side from where I was. At this point, I guess you could say that my body went into overdrive as adrenaline kicked in, and I sprinted as fast as I could and went around to the other side of the fence. I almost choked when I saw my little brother, shorts off, mouth covered, being dragged across to the other side of the alleyway by a man that looks to be in his mid-40s or 50s with long unruly hair. Now, I know a lot of people would have screamed out at this point, but for some reason, don't ask me why, I just sprinted as hard as I could at this bastard. While I had tears in my eyes, more than scared for my brother, I was angry, like seriously infuriated. I was gonna kill this bastard. He must have heard me coming, because he turned around to face me and dropped my younger brother. I had to run 20 meters, and I was now less than half a meter away from him now. He tried to grab at me, but I just kept running as hard as possible for me, and ended up knocking him over. He swore, and tried to get back up, but I just let loose, and started stomping on his face and gut. I was gonna keep on going, until this bastard was dead. But reason came back to me, after I heard my brother begin to cry loudly. Without asking any questions, I picked him up, and ran as fast as I could with him back to my house. At this point, it was pitch black, and my mom was frantic. No doubt she was about to let loose on us. She stopped when she saw the look on both our faces, and realized that my brother didn't have any pants on. After explaining the situation, rather terribly, because the adrenaline had worn off, and I was blabbering and stuttering all over the place, my mom gave us both the biggest hug ever, and cried with us. We called the police soon after, and I was asked by the police officers to give details about the man's appearance, which I did as best as I could. I was lucky I was dealing with a rather thin man, as opposed to a muscle-bound freak who likes small kids. Thankfully, my brother told me that, yes, the man had come up behind him and subdued him, but had stopped taking off his clothes when he heard me call out his name. To this day, I'm so thankful to whatever's watching over me that I didn't get there a second later and was able to successfully get my brother back. Needless to say, we moved suburbs soon after that and are now living in a steady upper middle class suburb up north.